Hi, I'm Amy Booth, the Deputy Director of the Buenos Aires Herald, and I'm here in our newsroom at La Maquinita today with Juan Germano of the political consultancy Isonomía. He's the CEO there, and he's been doing some really interesting work around the elections. We're recording this 2 days after Peronism got a huge victory in the Buenos Aires province elections and about 6-7 weeks ahead of Argentina's national 2025 midterm elections. It's a really interesting time to be looking at Argentine politics. There's been a huge amount going on, and so it's great to have an expert like Juan here in the newsroom. Welcome.
Well, please, thank you for the invitation.
Great, thanks. So I'd like to start by asking, Peronism won by a huge margin on Sunday. We're talking 13 points. I don't think it's what the government was expecting. I'm not even sure Peronism themselves were expecting it. How surprising was this result?
Well, maybe not the result. Maybe the difference was the shocking part of last Sunday. Of course, for any non-Peronist force going into the province of Buenos Aires against a unified Peronism, it's always a tricky one.
Right,
it's never easy. But having said so, maybe the difference was one of the things that surprised the most. It was a quite unique election because for the first time we had the province of Buenos Aires voting away from the logic of the national election.
Yeah, right. They split it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there was like this. There still is, but like this idea of, okay, so how, the real power of mayors in the province of Buenos Aires,
right,
how they know the territory and how they can, not influence vote, but they are controlling the territory. And of course, when you had the election at the provincial level, always at the same moment as the national one, with presidential elections or even with national elections, there was always the idea of how is this power really that strong, that intense? So now it was like a good moment to actually analyze and compare and know if that was correct. And the answer was yes. Because if you analyze the results all along the province, you see that almost 80% of the municipalities we won the ones that were that the government was in power, even for LLA, but also for the Peronism. So I think that it showed the real power of mayors in the election. And well, we had a massive difference between Peronist mayors against a non-Peronist force, a new one, which they didn't have as in the past, maybe the territoriality of the radicals that Pro used to have in the past.
Yeah,
So in that process, I think it showed the real strength of mayors in the province of Buenos Aires.
Right, yeah, because people have often described Milei as a bit of a floating head in the sense that he's almost like this celebrity president with a very strong personalist image. But then when you look at, the fact that he doesn't have governors, La Libertad Avanza has not been performing that well in the provincial elections this year, I think it goes to show that it's something that he seems to have been sort of coasting over, but it is a real weakness, right? I wanted to ask a little bit about the government's reaction to the results. So Milei came out, and to his credit, he was very clear, and he was saying like we've had a defeat, we lost here, and he said mistakes have been made. But he also said that La Libertad Avanza is going to stick to its guns. Essentially, he was saying we're going to continue to do this. We're not going to change anything. The economy minister came out saying there are not going to be any changes on the economic front. Has the government really recognized its mistakes? Has it done anything to change course and correct course even ahead of the national midterms?
Well, one of the questions we had when we knew the results, the surprise of the magnitude of the difference, was, okay, so it's important to analyze the first words of the president.
Right.
And Milei went there, spoke, and I think it was quite an interesting words he used, because he acknowledged, of course, the loss, which is not always happen that way. Yeah. But we still don't know the real changes that he's proposing in terms of the political strategy. In my view, when you have these sort of results, massive losses, in my view, you always need big changes. You know?
Okay, big
When
loss,
you-
big change.
Yeah, exactly. Makes sense, you know, when it's not about, but because you can lose an election against the Peronism in the province of Buenos Aires, losing by 4, 5, 6 points, and you can discuss tactics, marketing, you know, if the message was correct, like the little details, you know. When you had this result, I think it's more profound, you know. So
Absolutely,
that's why we are so far waiting to see the real changes that he's saying. Of course, it's not just about politics.
Yeah.
Again, with this result in mind, and with a few weeks away from the national election, I think the government needs to show and do some real changes.
Right, and in fact, in some senses, we've seen the opposite, right? Because the most important or the most significant announcement that we've really had so far was that they announced that they were creating a sort of political working table last night, and that it was going to involve people like his spokesman Manuel Adorni, his sister Karina Milei, Lower House President Martin Menem, a few cabinet ministers. These are already people that, as we understand it, Milei's been working fairly closely with, so that doesn't seem like too much of a change. It doesn't seem like a government that's recognizing that it's made mistakes, does it?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. On the other side, I might say, you know, this government has been always institutionally weak. No governors, a few deputies, a few senators, almost no mayors. But it was also quite bold in plenty of decisions. Changing the way we vote. We're going to vote in October with a different ballot. La ley bases. The decision of going and running against PRO in the city of Buenos Aires. It combined being a bold government with a weak government, with a institutionally weak government. So my point is, if you see the dynamic of Congress, for example, you've seen that the first year and a half of the government, until Libragate, but basically what changed the dynamic of Congress, which was a Congress that was playing along with the government in the first the first half of more than half of his administration, and the last few months, something changed there. And what changed was the, again, bold decision of playing with their own candidates in plenty of provinces where the government has been doing some sort of arrangements, political arrangements with the governors. And that sort of changed the dynamic of Congress. Why am I saying this? Because at the same point that this decision sort of complicate things in the short term in Congress, also it can happen, it's not impossible to think, not unreal to think, that let's assume that the government has a good election in October. Maybe slightly worse than the consensus a few weeks ago, but still with possibilities of winning. If that happens, then you have, for the next 2 years of his administration, a Congress not enough to pass legislation. He still needs to make.
He's still going to need to make deals, right?
But he can guarantee himself the minority of the veto. You know, the famous 87 heroes that he used in the past. So again, he wasn't the best when he won in the city of Buenos Aires against PRO. Not the worst strategy ever. What happened in the province, because it can change quickly in Argentina, and we've been seeing we are a country of massive changes, you know. So that's why I'm sort of more conservative in like the big titles of, you know, of he won fair square in the city, and now he's a massive failure because he missed the strategy in the province.
Right, that's the thing. Like, we need to take these huge announcements with a pinch of salt, right? Because while it is Milei's first big electoral loss since he took power, we did know that this was a Peronist stronghold, and we can't assume that we can extrapolate the results from Sunday to the whole country when it comes to October. So I did want to ask a little bit. We haven't really talked about the reasons among popular opinion, and there are two factors that I think play interesting roles here. One is that obviously we've just had this none of this has been judicially proven yet, but there's a corruption scandal going on that's affecting the highest ranks of his government, where, you know, this leaked audio footage has accused his sister even of being involved in taking kickbacks for disability agency state contracts, which has not gone down well at all among a lot of people. But then we're also in a situation where a lot of people just don't really have any money. You know, like Milei has managed to cut inflation, but it's come for a lot of people at the cost of lost purchasing power. They can't consume things anymore. Like they're not getting through to the end of the month, even with lower inflation. Which of these factors do you think is more important for the people of Buenos Aires province and indeed for Argentina?
Well, it's a difficult one. I think a little bit of both, I guess. On the one side, Milei took office back in December 2023, and it was extremely clear that Argentinians had one mandate for him, that was end inflation, or fight inflation. And he was quite good at that. You know, the main problem of Argentinians, I remember back in February, March 2024, was 44% of Argentinians saying the main problem of the country is inflation. From that number, now it's less than 10. It's almost 8. Of course, that creates new problems, new demands, new challenges for the government. Regarding crime, regarding corruption, regarding purchasing power, unemployment. And so it was quite clear that now, in the mid 2025, the mandate of the government was changing. And what was enough for this process, these first 2 years, like fighting inflation at all costs, it was always also really clear that it wasn't gonna be enough for the next 2 years until 2027. So one point is that. He also came with a mandate of changing things radically. The way he spoke, his narrative, his physique du role, everything was of an outsider. And this idea of, we wanted, as Argentinians, we voted an anti-establishment, anti-system sort of candidate. And he always had, for these 2 years, a gap between the idea of Milei solving the big problems for Argentina against Milei solving my problems. And he always was better. The idea of around 45% saying he's trying to solve the big ones, the big problems, against a 30% saying he's solving my own. So that gap always was part of his administration. But I'm sorry, corruption, inflation was a macro problem. Corruption was also a big problem for one of perceived Argentinians see corruption as one of the big issues to be solved. And that's why maybe what happened a couple of weeks ago with this audio and everything, it wasn't or had some sort of some hit for the government. I think it's possible to think that way.
Yeah, because I mean, I've heard some people saying that they think that this is the kind of old school corruption that's the exact, because, you know, Libra was kind of a weird scandal, right? Like, it was a very uniquely Milei in the way that it involved cryptocurrencies. It's probably a scandal that a lot of people struggle to understand on the face of it. Whereas this is like a really old school corruption scandal, right? These accusations that sort of family members close to the president have their hand in the cookie jar, as it were. So I want to move on to ask a little bit about kind of political risk going into the elections, because I know that probably some of those who are watching us might be decision makers, business leaders, diplomats, that sort of thing. You know, we saw that the dollar take off yesterday. Country risk was up as well. It shows that there's sort of a certain segment of the business community, certainly, that is not happy with the election results. So, do you think that, what do you think this says in terms of political risk, and what do you think the big indicators are going to be going into October?
Well, if you analyze this as a midterm election, which it is, so you should be analyzing seats.
Yeah.
Honestly, like a bad election for the government or a very good election for the government. It changed a little bit the dynamic of Congress, but it's not a massive change in terms of distribution of power inside of the parliament.
Right, half of the Chamber of Deputies and a third of the Senate is what's up for renewal, right?
So correct.
Yeah.
So basically, it's not. Of course, it's not the same to obtain 32 points or low 30s than low 40s.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
In terms of the optics, you know,
Right.
and incentives of the rest of the system. But having said so, a good election or a bad election for the government, in order to make reforms, you know, structural reforms, he needs to go and make some sort of arrangements with pro deputies, with other governors, other permanent governors. That's not again, the dynamic of Congress is still the same. But what changes a lot is what we Argentinians, the market, you know, international analysts feel that might be happening. And that's why he needs to have a good election, because again, he's been quite weak in terms of the institutional analysis. Not a lot of deputies, not a lot of senators, blah, blah. But so it's not the same to have public opinion on his side.
Exactly.
That's why it's important for Milei this midterm election. But again, no matter what, good election or bad election in October, he still needs to perform and conduct some arrangements with the rest of the Congress if he wants to make the reforms that he said he's going to be doing.
Yeah, right, because we have a situation where essentially his big bet is that he's going to strengthen his hand in Congress as much as possible, and that the more deputies and lawmakers he can get in October, then the less he's going to depend on being able to persuade friendly opposition parties like the radicals to support his agenda. And if his capacity to strengthen his hand in Congress is now being put into question, then that's an interesting question mark, right? And it comes in a week where one of his vetoes was just overturned, which means that the opposition was able to muster 2/3 against in both houses. We've seen some of his vetoes overturned in the Senate as well. And so I get the sense that in terms of policy making, law making, and these big decisions, that's where a lot of people are looking, right?
Well, I think the government always analyzed the Congress in a different way as the books of political science might think. And why? Because he won. We knew already back in 2023 that he didn't have enough seats in the lower chamber or the upper chamber. So he needed arrangements with other political forces, but he never created like a parliamentary coalition.
Yeah.
You know? And he always looked, or the magic number for him was 87. With 87 deputies, it's like the minority of the veto. So he can avoid that the Congress pass legislation that he's against.
Yeah.
So it was always a defensive approach to the Congress rather than a way to create some sort of parliamentary coalitions to pass legislation. Even though he passed important legislation. But again, the idea of reforms, even winning or losing, having a good result or a bad result in this election, he still needs to create some sort of consensus.
Yeah.
So in that way, maybe one of the consequences of this loss in the province of Buenos Aires is that, well, he might be forced more clearly to go into that kind of, I would say, more traditional approach of how a minority government can relate with the rest of the Congress.
Yeah.
In that way, again, he was new back in 2023, but now with 2 years being the government, I think it changes a little bit the incentives to actually try to go into a more, again, a traditional way of approaching a difficult Congress.
Yeah, okay. I have one last question for you before we finish, which is if you had to say three indicators or three factors that you're really going to be looking at between now and October the 26th, what would those be?
Well, for this election,
Yeah.
turnover, if you analyze the amount of voters that in the province of Buenos Aires that chose Peronism now, if you see 4 years ago or 8 years ago, it's basically the same amount of voters. The low turnout you had in this midterm election in 2025 was basically a former LLA or pro voter. So one of the things to follow for October, in my opinion, is if this voter which decided to stay at home for whatever reason, now decides to go and show up and maybe support the government. So turnout is the number one reason. Number two, what we just discussed. Okay, so massive losses demands, in my view, big changes. Well, what's the big change we're going to see? It's not going to be economic, at least that's what he said. It's going to be political. Okay, so what? Again, the magnitude of the loss in the province, in my view, it demands not only just a tactical change, but something more profound. So that's number two. And number three, well, I think it's interesting to see the result in October, which has to do a lot with optics, more than like real power in Congress. It's more about the perception that the rest of the system have to see what kind of government are we going to see for the next 2 years.
Okay, so voter turnout, optics, and what changes the government makes between now and October, three things to watch. Juan Germano from Isonomía, thank you so much for speaking to the Herald today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that, and check out our YouTube channel for more.